Hey everyone, PK here. In this episode, we're talking about how to start property investing on a very low income. But just before we do, this is the view from our balcony at the hotel in Abu Dhabi, and you can see the Arabian sun just about setting. Beautiful blue skies. Well, they were blue skies, and this beautiful sea at the Sadariyat island where we're staying. This is a really cool panoramic shot. It's a nice place for a holiday. Kids are playing down there with kites and things like that. Nice place for a holiday. I'm not sure if I'd want to move here, but just beautiful place to come every now and then. Anyway, let's get into it. So 5 ways you can start investing in real estate, even if you are on a low income. Okay, number 1, buy properties that are sub $350,000. Sub $350,000. I know that if you're in, I don't know, let's say Melbourne and Sydney, you probably automatically think that, oh, hey, my income is only $50,000 a year, my income is only $60,000 a year, my income is less than $100,000 a year. I can't really be a property investor. But if you look outside of Melbourne, Sydney, if you look at places like WA, like SA, like Queensland, that you actually find that there are lots of properties under $350,000 that you can reasonably buy, you can actually afford. Now, I'm not saying to just buy anything under $350, right? Just because it's cheap doesn't make it a good property investment. But there are those that exist, and will they exist in 5 years now, 5 years time from now? Like maybe, but I don't think so, right? The way that I make decisions, I ask myself 2 questions. And if you are erring on the side of investing in real estate, but you're like, I'm not a rich person, I want to give you my decision framework, my decision-making framework, all right? The first thing I ask myself is, if I did this, if I said yes to it, if I made this decision to do this 10 years ago, what would my life be like now? And the second way I make a decision is, if I say yes to this now, if I make this decision now, what will my life be like in 10 years' time? All right. And if the answer is positive or good for either or both of those questions, then that's when I say yes to things. So even if you're only making $70,000, $80,000 a year, if you invest in real estate 10 years ago, if you'd invested, would you be happy right now? Of course the answer is yes, right? That's a loaded question. But the second part, if you invest now, fast forward in 10 years' time, will you be happy that you made that decision? And if the answer is yes in your mind, then you should invest, because you can still, in 10 years' time, on $100,000 or on $50,000 or $70,000 a year in income, will you be able to invest in real estate? Honestly, I don't know, but I doubt it, okay? So that's the first point. The second way to invest in real estate in Australia on a low income is by buying high cash flow properties. Now, the typical thought is that to be a property investor, you need to negatively gear. By the way, the sun is it's just spectacular. Check that out. Okay, back to me. You need to be like this rich person. You're able to negatively gear by tens of thousands, if not just thousands of dollars every single year. You don't need to do that as a property investor. You can buy positive cash flow, or at least cash flowing neutral, or just, properties that cost you maybe a couple of $1,000s every year. You can buy those types of properties. And so I know that if you're on $60,000 a year, right, you're like, I don't have all this spare change, PK. Like, I'm not one of those rich people that, that are just property investors. There's 2 things I want to say. Well, first of all, is that if you buy cash flowing properties with a yield of above 6 or 7%, then even when interest rates are as high as they are now, or if they even go up a little bit more, then that doesn't really bite you, right? That doesn't really bite you. Of course, you need to make, some sacrifices. You can't just live lavishly, but that's like in any investing, you should be prudent. And the second thing I want to say about that as well is that you really, really need to consider, if I, have to put in a couple of $1,000s a year into this property, how much is it going to grow? What is that trade-off? Am I able to make that trade-off? Is that a good trade-off to make? And once again, coming back to that decision-making framework, in 10 years' time, if that thing doubles, triples, whatever, then the answer is probably yes, right? I mean, I'm not answering this for you, answer it for yourself. but buying high cash flow properties is the way to do it. And by the way, I just want to make this point as well. Property investors on average in Australia, they are not like rich people. Don't quote me on this because I'm not in front of my computer, obviously on holidays, but I think that the average investor in Australia makes $90,000. Like, they're just nurses, they're police, men and women, they're government workers, they're just like normal people. They're not like magnates or tycoons of their industries. Okay, so just keep that in mind as well. Property investing, there's more than 2.2 million property investors in Australia, and they're just, most of them are just very normal people on normal incomes, normal salaries. The third way I want you to understand investing in property on a low income, right, is, you really can't afford for things to go wrong. I mean, that's true even on a high income. Even if you're making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, you still don't want things to go wrong. But that is exacerbated on a lower income. You just can't afford any mistakes. So why not try before you buy, right? Like, before you pay anyone any money, before you buy anything, even before you put a cent into a property, why don't you do the numbers, do the data analysis, select some mock properties, some trial properties, and maybe for 6 months, a year. I mean, depending on your risk appetite, how conservative you are, maybe for 2 years. Just monitor that market, okay? Maybe do that multiple times simultaneously. Monitor 12 markets, hypothetically buy 12 properties in 12 different markets that you think are going to do well as per the data, and just monitor them for 6 months, a year, or whatever. And if they do actually do well, because you actually have a true, proven, systematic data approach, then you know that you're not taking a risk. You're not gambling because you've actually trialed it, you've tested it, you've trialed it before you bought it. All right, it's like in stock investing. Sometimes you create a portfolio, see what it does, and most times I did that. I lost a lot of money, but thankfully it was just mock. It wasn't real. So I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. It's not working out. So do that in property. Find a property, follow it. Imagine you had bought in it. Imagine you invested in it, and see how it goes. And if it goes really well, then you're ready to actually hit the road. Have the rubber hit the road, so to speak. Okay, the fourth thing, okay, as a low income property investor, how to get into the market, how to make this work for you, is don't be despondent. Okay, don't be despondent about your low borrowing capacity. I know so many of you will be like, okay, I talked to my broker, I can only really borrow like enough for one property. I can only really borrow enough for like 2 properties maximum on my income. How is that going to serve me? How is that going to get me out of the rat race? How is that going to build me a big passive income? How am I going to get to multiple properties if my borrowing capacity is only 500K? I really don't want you to become despondent, because the reality is that that's your current borrowing capacity, static borrowing capacity, and in a moment of time right now. Right now, interest rates are high. When interest rates, or higher, I should say, when interest rates drop, your borrowing capacity increases. Right now, APRA enforces a 3% buffer between real official cash rate and what the banks have to use as their calculators to see what they are allowed to lend you. Okay, when that serviceability buffer from APRA, it never used to be 3%. It was only 3% because interest rates were so low. So they were like, if interest rates ever have to hike up rapidly, then the economy will remain strong. People won't default. And that's exactly what happened, and that's exactly what's happening. People aren't having to run and default and just forego their mortgage repayment. So that was a good thing. But right now, is 3% still a valid amount, or is it overkill? I reckon it's overkill. So that's another example of how that could be trimmed down to let's say 1%, which it used to be. And that will improve your borrowing capacity as you progress in your career. Your income will increase. That will improve your borrowing capacity. As your kids perhaps grow up, they will maybe leave home, or they'll be less dependent on you. That will improve your borrowing capacity. Even if you just buy one property now, the rents will continue to go up, provided you buy well. Your LVR, in other words, your debt to overall property value, will go down as the value increases in the property. All these things contribute. I mean, these are just the tip of the iceberg. There's a myriad of things that can reconfigure themselves to improve your borrowing capacity. So don't think that, right now, my bank is saying, I can only borrow 500K, so property investing is not worth it for me on a low income. No, I mean, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, or 2 years' time, or staged out, you might be able to borrow for enough for 3, 4, 5 properties. You just don't know, right? I treat the economy and interest rates and all these things like the weather. You always get up in the morning and check the weather, but no one can predict the weather perfectly, right? The weather goes up and down, but we still go to work, right? We still go to work. So that's how investing should be. The weather is up and down, stormy, hail, clear skies. We still invest, but we invest smartly. You know, when it's going to rain, we take an umbrella to work, all right, so we don't get wet. Same with investing. When it's going to rain, when interest rates are rising or whatever, it's uncertainty, we take a metaphorical umbrella. We have our risk mitigation strategies and approaches in place, like cash buffers and things like that. So that's the fourth way for low income earners to really get ahead and make money in real estate and property investing. And the fifth way is more of a mindset thing, and it really comes back to the decision-making framework I introduced at the start. Even if you can just buy one property, even if you can just buy 2 properties, even if you can just buy only 3 properties, sub 350K properties, right? I want you to understand, what is the opportunity cost in 20 years of not doing anything now? What is the opportunity cost in 20 years of not doing anything now? If you think, you're down and out, you're like, I only make, 70K, 50K, 60K, 80K, I have a kid or whatever the case, like I'm barely getting by. Of course, I don't want you to invest in property to create a more burdensome life. That is not what I'm talking about. But if you have some cash buffers, if you can afford a few $1,000s a year in holding costs and worst case scenario, if you can scrape together a $50,000 deposit to buy a 300 to 350K property, then what is the opportunity cost of not doing that in 20 years' time? I'll tell you, in 20 years' time, you're going to tell yourself that I should have bought a property 20 years ago. I mean, famous last words, maybe a whole depression hits us or whatever. But once again, do the best with what you have. And so once again, I just want to emphasize, for low income earners, property investing is not for the rich. In fact, statistically, it's mostly people who are average income earners who do invest in property. But I really want to target this at low income earners. Improve your mindset, invest in yourself. Your mind is where you make money, not anything external to start with. Start with sub 350K properties. Buy high cash flow properties, so that almost immediately rules out Sydney and Melbourne. And try before you buy, test out the waters. Don't just rush into things. What's that saying? Fools rush in where angels dare to tread. Okay, so just test the waters to start with by following the market for a while, and don't be despondent, okay, that you're not starting with a lot. No one starts with a lot. In fact, I just think that's depressing, starting with a lot, because then where's the achievement? Where's the thrill of accomplishment? Hopefully this video brought you a ton of value. You can see the sun has well and truly set here on Sadiriyat. I think that's how you pronounce it, island in Abu Dhabi. We arrived here from Egypt, from Cairo yesterday. We're here for another week, and then we're going to Dubai. This is the sort of the last leg of our trip, but it's really, really beautiful here. My wife and son are enjoying inside today. We went to Kidzania, which is an amazing kind of like entertainment park, but for kids, they do different occupations like role play. They become doctors, firemen, policemen, etc., etc. That's what we did today. My son had a blast, and now I'm going to go down to the beach and go for a nice walk. All right, my name's PK. Hopefully this brought you value, guys. Hit the subscribe button, give it a like, turn the notification bell on, and let me know if you have any other tips for low income earners. We can put them in the comments, and more people can get value out of that. Thank you, guys. See you later.